My dear friends, welcome. It is an absolute privilege to welcome you aboard this groundbreaking news program. Today, we embark on a journey like a well-prepared flight plan that takes us into the heart of Mormon. Together, we will explore the intersection of news, history, and culture with a steady hand and an open heart. Whether you're joining us from the Wasatch Front, where the mountains reach toward heaven, or tuning in from distant lands, Germany, perhaps this program is for you. And if you happen to feel a little turbulence in your faith or understanding, don't worry. Just keep your seatbelt fastened, stay calm, and remember, the news is not about perfect faith. It's about the truth. So don't doubt your doubts, fasten your spiritual seatbelts, adjust your tray tables, and prepare for takeoff, because your favorite news program starts now. This is where news meets insight and the stories of our faith unfold. And who knows, by the end of this journey, you may find yourself a little closer to heaven. Figuratively, of course.
Danke, Dieter. Danke schön.
That guy's a talker, isn't he?
Oh yeah, he's a talker. He's a talker. I thought he was giving it like a general conference talk. He was going to go the whole 15 minutes. But regardless, that's quite an introduction. Quite an introduction. We're getting really a lot of well-known people to do this. It's kind of like becoming a thing, like calling into the original Frasier show. Remember, different people. What show is this? I think this is the Mormon Newscast. Welcome everybody to the Mormon Newscast. I'm Radio Free Mormon. I'm joined tonight by Rebecca Biblioteca and Bill Reel. Rebecca, how are you? And then Bill, how are you?
I am better. I had to miss last week. I had a little dental scenario. This whole side of my face is falling apart. I'm not kidding. From shingles to sinus infection to orthodontia infection. I think next my ear is going to fall off. So stay tuned.
Bill. And I'm doing great.
Exactly. You're a lot younger than we are, Bill. Just wait. When you get older, things start dropping off you. It just happens.
Yes, that whippersnapper Bill Reel. He's got a lot to look forward to, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah. Got a good 15 years left.
Well, today's date is January 20th, 2025. This is the Mormon Newscast. We've got a lot of news stories we want to go over with you tonight. And the first one, let me see here. Is this the correct one? I think it's the other one. Yeah. We're going to cover, among other things, the 2024 Brodie Awards, though that will be the last story, I believe, tonight covered by Bill Reel. We'll also be covering the Fairview Temple update and more. Rebecca Biblioteca will be covering that. The federal court tithing refund, not quite yet. I'll be covering that. Is extended group fasting a thing now? I think that's Rebecca. And I think Rebecca is also going to be talking about, do franchise owners have free agency? But first, the Fairview Temple update and more. Rebecca Biblioteca, tell us all about it.
I would be happy to. It's TUT, Temple Update Time. We haven't had one of these for a while, and we have like 4 temples to catch you guys up on. And I'm really excited about all of these updates. They're pretty crazy. So Bakersfield, California is a temple that we don't talk about too often, but it's kind of in the process, moving along like the other temples. We don't get a lot of information out of Bakersfield behind the scenes like some of the other temples where people contact us, mostly faithful members letting us know what's going on. But in Bakersfield, articles come out and we will pick up on those. So in this case, there's an article that says the environmental review is to begin on the Bakersfield LDS Temple. And that tells us that it's moving right along. There is a resident group, of course, that is expressing concern. It's organized. As I understand it, they have a PR person and an attorney. But despite all of that, looks like the church is just plowing on ahead with its environmental review. And that will tell us, I'm sure I'm going to predict that everything's just fine. No problems with building that temple. So I thought the article was a little bit interesting. I feel like it's deja vu as I kind of go through it. I mean, tell me if you've heard any of these statements before. So it basically is starting out by saying that the plans for the Bakersfield Temple on Stockdale Highway are moving forward. These plans were announced back in 2023. And the steeple is 124 feet. It's going to be one of those kind of little modular pop-up up looking temples. Bakersfield has done a really good job of putting out renderings of how this temple will impact their neighborhood. You can see there's one of the homes in Bakersfield. They tend to be one story. And what is that coming up right behind it? There it is. That is the impact visually of this 124-foot steeple on just a simple residential area.
It's like the Godzilla temple.
It's like the Godzilla temple. No, they did a really good job of putting out these renderings because it really shows, it's one thing to say this will impact our neighborhood, but to show it like this, there's no way that people can't understand what they're talking about. So the article goes on to say last year, residents of Brighton Park, it's a 55 and over gated community right there adjacent to the site, they organized an ad hoc committee to advocate for changes in the temple design. Again, I feel like we should either take a drink or raise our hand when we hear something that we've heard in some other town as they talk about a temple. On Tuesday, the committee released a statement saying it was disappointed to see plans for the 124-foot steeple were unchanged as the project's environmental review is set to move forward. They said, "We don't object to the temple being there at all." Burnett told the Californian, "We are single level, and that's what they're proposing is something that is incredibly out of the realm of what was proposed there from the standpoint of the property." And they're just talking about visually how it looks here. Let's see. Let's go to the next one here. Church representatives said the steeple, raise your hand again if you've heard this before, is an important feature of the temple and will be illuminated in such a way as to not pollute the local environment. It's an important part of the temple, said Merrill Dibble, stake president of the LDS Church of Bakersfield. The steeple helps point us toward heaven and toward God. It's a critical piece and enhances the building. Okay, Dibble, I don't want to quibble with this statement, but I must point out the picture that I've attached here to his statement, and that is the Brussels, Belgium temple. Can you see what's on top of that, RFM? What is that?
That looks like a hypodermic needle.
Yeah, it is a tiny, itsy bitsy little steeple that they just kind of put up there. So as far as Dibble's comments on the integral part of the temple, pointing your eyes toward heaven, didn't get the memo with this Brussels steeple. We've been having a lot of fun with the Brussels building here, and we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Rebecca, can I mention about the steeple?
Yes.
In Mormonism, because heaven and God both have distinct locations, the odds are that at any given time, a steeple is not going to be pointing toward God or heaven.
That's an interesting observation.
Yeah, almost 100%.
Yeah.
No, that's a really interesting observation. You're absolutely right. And if you can see here, again, like I said, really good renderings. Look at these, showing what it would look like as you're driving toward it. Again, the neighborhood there. The committee members say they've met with church representatives several times, and their main concern is height and bright. Bakersfield is the one who coined that, height and bright. I think that's great, of the steeple, and that remains unchanged. Our problem is the LDS is saying one thing to us, but their actions betray those statements. Surprising.
They must be misunderstood.
I'm sure that it was a misunderstanding. Yes. They have done not one single thing to address our expressed concerns, the resident committee is saying. Committee members have stressed their opposition is specifically to the proposed height of the steeple, not to the temple and not to the LDS church, right? We've heard this statement over and over in all the towns that we follow. It's very important to understand that they are welcome, but have some consideration for existing codes and our concerns, Burnett said. Inviting us to an open house does not equate to saying we hear you and we can come to some kind of compromise. So if you guys have any comments on that, to me, it's deja vu all over again in Bakersfield.
They're welcome at this point. Pretty soon they won't be.
I'll only say that, again, everybody, I've said this before on the past shows, that everybody's catching up now. That they can't get away with these things as easily. So if their plan is to do this across the country going forward with whatever temples they decide to announce and build, they're just going to piss off every town. They're going to make everybody hate them. People already think Mormons are weird. They think the church is extreme, sort of on the culty side. And now you're just going to make everybody angry, which is probably the worst thing you want to do.
I want to mention something here because I think it's important. Bill said that these cities or the church is not going to be able to get away with this like they used to be able to. And that's important. that's significant, and that never would have happened except for you, Rebecca Bibliotech.
Yep.
My goodness.
You were the reason. You. And I just wanted to point that out because this is a huge change that the church now has to engage with. They're going to still try and steamroll everybody, but people are getting wise, and if they want to, they can know what to do to not fall for the tricks and the traps that the church sets for them. And that's all because of you, Rebecca.
You can bring profit to the negotiating table. That's how strong the world has gotten.
Yeah, I think it is. And I do know that towns are communicating with each other. Federal Way, they've announced this McKinney-sized temple, the previous one, 174 5 feet in an area where the zoning is 60 feet again. And that town is communicating with Fairview, so I feel like everybody's going to start back channeling and everybody is going to be up to speed very quickly, And again, the idea is let's have a temple. Everybody's excited about it, but let's follow the zoning. Let's follow the codes. So the next update I have is for Fairview. And I must admit, after we watched the meeting, remember we live streamed this on the newscast and we watched it all together. We had our Fairview shirts on, and it was about the non-binding mediation agreement. The church and Fairview had gone to mediation and they had come up with an agreement. You can see this temple here, much shorter, still 120-ish feet. And they were going to hammer out some details. It was going to have to go through the same process as the original design. They were going to, and I'll go to this next slide. I will say very quickly. So I assumed everything was just moving along just fine, right? We watched that. They're going to submit their application. According to the document of the non-binding agreement, it says the church will amend its current CUP application to reflect the agreements described in blah, blah, blah. Everything we decided in this non-binding agreement, we're going to put together in a new application, and we're going to give it to the city no later than January 13th. That was this last Monday, 2025. And at that point, the same process starts over. We're going to have planning and zoning. We're going to have town council with this new design that they come up with. So I was just kind of curious. And on Monday, January 13th, I emailed somebody in the city of Fairview, the town secretary or manager or something. And I said, was that application submitted? And I got a very surprising answer. The answer was, it was not submitted. Now, that's kind of problematic. The town needs 30 days from submittal of application until the first time they can discuss it at planning and zoning, because there's a notification process that legally has to happen. You have to let people know that this new application has been submitted. So I was extremely surprised. Why would the LDS Church have missed that? I mean, I say deadline, but it's basically from that document you see there, agreed upon that they would submit this and everything would move forward. So I talked to a couple people, former LDS temple architects, to see, does that ever happen? Do they just go, oh, shoot, dang it, forgot to turn that in? Is some low level person, are their heads going to roll? And the consensus between the people I talked to, and I'm paraphrasing here what a couple people said, missing the deadline by accident is truly unthinkable. This could be indicative of a deliberate plan or a change in direction. Now, I also reached out to Fairview United. That's the group of citizens there, the green shirts, as they call them. And they were also extremely surprised that that deadline was missed. And they also agree that this means something. It means there may be a change of heart on the church's part. They may have a different plan in mind. Something is going on. We don't know any more than that. But anyway, what do you two think about that? Missing the deadline. There is no application right now, and we don't know what the plan is going forward.
Well, I think the funny thing is that you look at this and you can see that the skids were all greased with this. This was going to be zoom right through because we've reached an agreement between the city, between the church. It's a compromise, and regardless of what the citizens have to say, although they will be heard, they won't be listened to. That was going to happen. And you can see right there, right? January 13th, have that amended CUP. And what does CUP stand for again, Rebecca?
Conditional use permit. It's different than the normal zoning allowed, but they're saying, look, this is what we want to do. Let's talk about it in planning and zoning. Let's talk about it in town council. And we can do it because of RLUIPA.
So it's going to be the amended application, as was agreed upon. So this is all just to get it through the system. We'll do it on January 13th. It'll be due. The church agrees to it, by the way. Do you know who signed this? And I'll continue to talk and say it has to be 30 days according to the rules before they can send it to the zoning commission. So they're going to do it apparently 31 days later, right? They've got it all lined up February 13th.
Mm-hmm.
The town council will vote on it at the regularly scheduled meeting, March 4th, 2025. This is set to go because it's agreed between the parties. And the church did not fulfill even its first obligation, which apparently it promised to do. I was just wondering who signed this thing. Because,
I have a copy of the document. I'll have to look and see who signed. I don't remember, but I'm guessing all parties that were there at the mediation, or at least the authoritative parties that were there. So, and
they changed their mind. They changed their mind at some point, and it's not like there's anything legal you can do about it. It's just another instance of apparently the church lied here. They signed and agreed to do something in a binding document, and then they said, no, we're not going to do it. This is how the church operates.
Yeah, I'll just say that along with your temple architects, this is not the kind of mistakes that the church makes. They get these kinds of things right. The administrative side of things, the minus the SEC stuff, which was intentional, right? They don't unintentionally make these kinds of mistakes. And so this seems, as you point out, indicative that the church, when those folks went back to the church and said, hey, we've reached an agreement. Here's what the mediator said. Here's what the negotiation was. Here's where we ended up. Here's what we signed off on. Somebody further up the chain said, no, we're going to do this differently.
Yeah, well, an entire week has gone by since January 13th, since the deadline. And apparently nobody's brought it up or said, oops, or anything.
No.
Is that right, Rebecca?
Yeah, nobody has said anything. That's the thing. I just happened to contact the city and say, did that get turned in? And found out no. Now, I will say when I talked to some people from Fairview United, they upped their presence ever since the non-binding agreement and the meeting, where if we remember that, they were a little still not happy. And they had a choir event. They upped their fundraising. They certainly did not back down. Even though this is a new proposal with a smaller tower, they still feel it needs to come down, another 20 or so feet. So, I mean, there was speculation from Fairview United that their increased activity, maybe the church thought, having mediated that, as you said, RFM, smooth sailing at this point, all of a sudden in the interim, here's Fairview United, the citizens ramping up. Maybe that made them think twice or pause. Maybe that had some kind of impact. So maybe it wasn't going the way they thought. I don't know.
It could be anything.
It could be anything. Somebody even suggested maybe it means they're taking it completely somewhere else. Maybe they've completely taken it off the table. I mean, we really don't know, but we will try to find out.
But honestly, are you telling us that as of this date, a week after the deadline, the church or its lawyers, the lawyers are representing the church, that is the church, haven't contacted the city council or the mayor to say what's going on?
I mean, I would not know about that. Those would be private conversations, and I would hope that maybe a journalist might reach out to the city and say, did that get turned in? Maybe a journalist, somebody, one of the papers that's been covering this, maybe they could get more information, because certainly things go on behind the scenes that the rest of us can't know legally, especially with the town council. They have to be really locked down. They're they have certain parameters and rules they have to follow. So we're not aware. We don't know, but I'm sure we'll find out at some point. But it's certainly, like I said, I kind of put my Fairview United shirt in the back of my closet and I thought, okay, this will just kind of sail through. I'm dusting it off. I think there may be some new intrigue happening here. So we'll see.
Well, I hate to say more than one nice thing about you in an episode.
Uh-oh. Don't do it.
My gosh, nobody would know this except for you.
I don't know.
The journalists wouldn't know this except for you.
Yeah, probably not.
You are Nancy Drew.
You know what? I've always wanted to be Nancy Drew. My dream car is a blue Roadster that says Andrew on the back. So just
I'm guessing
put it out
Nancy
there.
Drew drove one of those.
Yeah, the blue Roadster. Exactly.
Andrew?
What?
Andrew?
No, N. Drew.
Oh, N. Drew.
The letter N and the license plate Drew. Yeah, it's always been my dream car since I was a little girl. All right, let's move on. A little bit more temple news, and then we'll continue with some other things. Brussels, we talked about this. We've been having a lot of fun. I even made a meme where I took the Brussels steeple and put it on the original McKinney Temple. But this steeple is just killing us. The building on the left is the original building. Now, I think that is extremely attractive. I love that building. I like that building a lot. On the right is the proposed remodel right there with the teeny tiny little steeple. I ran that graphic past my friends who used to be former LDS temple architects, and they said, yeah, I know the idea was to try to get this, sweeping grandeur of looking up, but it just kind of seems untethered and tacked on. And so we're not really sure. But I did come across someone who's been following the building of the Brussels Temple very closely. And I thought this was worth reading. I don't know who the name of this person is. It was on Reddit, and I tried to reach out because I'd love to know more, but they had a really comprehensive report. And it's interesting because in other countries, we've seen this in Manchester, Paris, with this temple, the towns they don't have the threat of RLUIPA, right? They can control what's built in their town. They can say no. They can refuse to offer a permit, and the church can't do anything about it. Nemo has brought up some correspondence with the Manchester Temple where the church is so just ingratiating. Oh, of course we'll change that. Oh, of course we'll do that because they have to, right? There's no RLUIPA. There's no threat of that. The behavior is a little bit different here in the United States. So anyway, I thought this is very interesting. This person says, and again, if you're out there listening, contact me. This is a great report. They say, I live in Brussels and I work near the location of the future Brussels Temple. The church has not yet received the official building permit. It's still up in the air, right? Currently, the city is conducting a public inquiry, which ends today. And I did report on this before. Part of their inquiry was one arm of their government looks into cults. They were a little concerned about that. And so they do. They do their due diligence, and then they look at these buildings that are coming in. The city commission is scheduled to meet the 28th of January to assess the application. So we'll know pretty soon whether the permit was passed or not. As this is a public inquiry, I reviewed all the available documents to provide you with a brief report. This guy is awesome. About the location. The site is on Avenue des Arts, a major avenue on the eastern edge of the city center. It is close to the seat of government and European institutions. The avenue is predominantly lined with corporate offices, financial entities, and public institutions. At first glance, it may seem unusual to choose this location for a temple as opposed to a quieter site outside of the city. But in my opinion, it is a power projection to establish a visible presence in the heart of Europe's political and financial center. I would agree with that. In Europe, it seems like the temples are right there, right? They're exactly where you can see. For example, the Manhattan Temple, which is being remodeled, it's right next to Juilliard. I never knew that. They're always right there. It's so interesting. So here's the really fascinating part. Key points with Brussels. The first application was rejected in July due to the proposed facade, which was deemed too different from surrounding buildings, if you remember that picture. Additionally, the top of the building needed to be made more discreet. It's unclear if this refers to the height of the steeple, as I couldn't access the initial application. So they have some problems with the design and the facade and fitting in with the area. The current building is an office space and will be repurposed as a building of collective interest. The ground floor will include a visitor center offering activities open to the public. In its application, the church emphasizes its humanitarian aid efforts and community service contributions. Now, that's very nice, but that's not really the function of the temple that's going to be built there. But apparently in the application, they didn't emphasize this. The Heritage Commission has recommended revising the project further. For them, the facade still deviates too much from the architectural style of neighboring buildings. Also, they recommend avoiding outdoor lighting at night. This is what you can recommend in Europe. You can't do that in the US with RLUIPA. And one final little part, I'm telling you, this is great. This
Rebecca,
guy's great. Yes.
Let me ask you this. The pictures you've shown us of the Brussels Temple, is that how it looks now? Or is that just the rendering?
I'll go back and show you. It looks like the picture on the left.
It looks like that now.
Yes.
Not before and after.
What they want to do is they want to turn it into, this is their new rendering. And I don't know if you can tell, but it's gold. It's bright gold up and down. And this is what they've done to the Manhattan Temple, which is being remodeled. It'll be done in a couple years. It has a bright gold facade like that. It's an office building. It does have a little bit of a higher steeple, and it's right there downtown next to Juilliard. So yeah, this is what they're proposing. And this is what all the different committees, like this Heritage Committee, has said, that doesn't really fit in. And let's not light that at night. So very interesting. Here's a little final one. It says the Brussels Architectural Service also advises revisions, specifically calling for greater sobriety in the facade design. Also, they recommend more services for public use, as the current proposal lacks sufficient provisions.
Well, the building as it currently is cannot be accused of not being sober.
Exactly.
This looks like the soberest town I've ever seen.
It does. It does. They're just saying the facade, it's a little too Mardi Gras, right? With its gold filigree and its teeny tiny steeple. I don't know.
What is the point of having a gold building if you can't light it up at night?
I don't know. It is uncertain whether the permit will be granted as is or if additional revisions will be required. Unfortunately, I would have liked to submit some remarks about during the inquiry period, but since today's the final day, that was last week, it is now too late to do so. And so he included some pictures. So I thought this was great. Again, you can see all these different organizations within the government can weigh in. The history, the architectural says, no, don't do that. And they have the right to say that about something going into their own town. This isn't happening in Cody, in Heber, in Fairview, in Bakersfield. It's not happening at all. So one other thing I thought I'd mention really quickly, and this is from our friend Martine, who is very familiar with Brussels.
Yes, she's from Brussels.
If you look at this picture on the right, that is the temple building. That's, if you went a little farther to the right, you'd see that corner. To the left here by this tree, there's a little sign you can see. That apparently is a very famous pub and restaurant with a very famous signature beer. She says it's extremely popular. So hopefully when people look for the door to the temple, they won't accidentally go next door. Literally, the doors will be right next to each other.
Well, the temple doesn't need a cafeteria now.
It doesn't need a cafeteria. So any quick thoughts on Brussels and just the idea that in other countries, they really do have to bend over backwards to do what the country says, these are our zoning. These are our ordinances and our codes.
Here's what I want to say about that specifically and how the church steamrolls over people like Bakersfield and trying to maybe yet again, we don't know, on and off in Fairview, they're used a steamroller on these communities. But over here in Europe, where they don't have our lupa, now all of a sudden they're on their hands and knees and, being sweethearts and everything. It makes me think this. When the way a church treats people is governed by the applicable law, that church has a problem.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add, and it's something I've said before, I read the Old Testament. I read the New Testament. I see what God's capable of. We hit a verifiable age of history, meaning that we now have the ability to look at what other witnesses say about events, specifically witnesses who don't share the same beliefs, and suddenly miracles have gone down the drain. And the modern church, the LDS church, in 2024, seems to lack anything other than just standard, normal human ability to navigate these kinds of issues. There's no more calling down balls of fire. There's no more frogs everywhere. There's no more rivers of blood.
Yeah.
There's no more plagues and blood on the above the door.
Those were the days.
This is just lawyers and administration, and they're so limited. And for anybody who's watching all of this take place, who's a believer, just notice that your church doesn't really have any supernatural magic to do anything, because this is the very kind of stuff where if God says there's going to be a gold temple there, daggone it, there's going to be one. And not anymore. Today, it all works the way our rational brains say it should work.
Yeah, God likes gold.
seems to, because I'm telling you, Manhattan. And again, a point that my co-host Landon on Mormonish made is, a mark of a person is how you act when you don't have to, right? They act so kind and ingratiating where they have to bend over backwards, like you said, and grovel, RFM. And then in these other towns, first meeting, we're going to sue you. They don't have to be kind in those towns. And so they're not going to do it. And that brings us to Cody. One last little update here. So Cody, Wyoming, this is the town where
I'm sorry, it's such an important point, and you've clarified it even better. And it makes me think of this other old saying that the judge of a person's character is how they treat someone who can't do anything for them. That's the difference, isn't it? Here in the United States, where they've got all the statutory power on their side, and they just treat them like crap because these people can't do anything for them, so they cream them. Over in Europe, where they can do something for them, they can deny it or they can give it. Well, we're going to treat you nicely. Yeah,
it's very telling. That's why I'm telling you, temple building it reveals everything. It pulls the curtain on all of it. And that's, I think, why it's so fascinating to myself and a lot of people. So Cody, Wyoming, the town where it all started, and it's still going on. People don't realize this is a process. Preserve Our Cody neighborhood has a court date with the Wyoming Supreme Court. I've mentioned this before, but this is happening. It is February 11th. 2025. It is at 2:30 p.m. and this will be live streamed. So hopefully we'll be able, through the newscast or any of our various podcasts, to be able to make this available to anybody that is curious about this. Because
it's a Tuesday, isn't it?
I think that is a Tuesday. Yeah,
because I think it's a Friday.
Valentine's Day is a Friday. Yeah, I think that's right. So again, they have really been working hard toward this. This little neighborhood committee is the little neighborhood committee that could. They are just smart, dedicated, incredible people there who I now call very good friends. I've gone there to visit. And again, I'll just very quickly go over what this is about. Okay. So number one, this is what the Preserve Our Cody neighborhood is objecting to and fighting against. These are the LDS claims. The LDS claim that a city ordinance takes precedence over the Wyoming statute, which resulted in the passage of the site plan. There's a difference in what the city says constitute passing a plan and what the state of Wyoming says. And the church says that the city is the one that takes precedence. The neighborhood is saying no.
Battle on that one then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I remember how I announced before that they had changed the stat. They had were revisiting the statute from a state level. Exactly.
Yes. So if that statute, if they actually do contradict, okay, it's been a long time.
Yep.
Since I've dealt with this issue, but my recollection is, statute state, ordinance is city. If they are actually, if this statute is actually, what is it called? Covering the same ground.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the exact phrase, but if it's, it'll come to me after the show. But if it's addressing the exact same issue, then yeah, the statute takes precedence.
Yeah, this is what they're saying. This is what the neighborhood group is saying. Number two, the LDS claimed that the conditional use permit was fully passed at the very first planning and zoning meeting back in 6/15/23. Right? And that's right when they sued the city in July. So this is what the church says. All the other meetings we had after that first meeting in Cody, nope, it fully passed at that first meeting. And again, the residents are saying that is not true. That is not backed up by the statute of Wyoming, even though there was confusion and we can't get into all the details. If nobody has followed Cody, go to our playlist on Mormonish. It's almost unbelievable. And then number three, the LDS claimed that the Preserve Our Cody neighborhood filed the suit too late and they deserve no consideration. The district court has ruled in favor of the LDS on all three of these points. And this is why they gave the church permission to start building. This is why they had that quick stealth groundbreaking. Remember how we talked about that, where they just zoomed in real fast? They broke the ground. And according to my sources there, they are building like gangbusters. It's crazy. Now, we do have the Preserve Our Cody neighborhood claims. I don't think we'll probably go into those right now, but they're basically the opposite of what the LDS church is saying. They're saying this did not pass back in July. There was all kinds of irregularities in the planning and zoning. It didn't pass. And, every further ruling past that is not correct. So they're going to have their day in court. And right here we have a picture of the building. Like, they are really going along. My friends there whose houses look right out over there say they are working on the central steeple to get that erected right there, right in the middle, an integral part of the building, which is interesting because one of their arguments is, the steeple's not really part of the building. It's just kind of a pop on, pop off, that's why it's not counted in the height. But here, as you see them build it, it's structurally right there from the very base of the building. My friend, one of the residents, says in Cody, they started building furiously right after the district court decision in August of 2024. They've already passed the first floor and welding the structure for the 10-foot tower. They work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. They have so many workers on the site. It looks like a life-size anthill crawling with safety vested workers.
Do they think that if they get the temple completed before the Supreme Court rules, they win?
Well, I think they think it's harder for a court to rule tear that down. Now, that's happened before,
I don't think so.
There are cases where it hasn't.
If you're talking about psychologically,
yeah,
or emotionally, I wouldn't expect a lot of that from judges or justices.
Can you imagine if they do rule to tear it down, what that will do to the LDS members there? Talk about a persecution.
I wouldn't have any compunction about an order saying tear it down, because it's your own freaking fault for building it while you knew the issue was unresolved.
100%. That's what I think too. They knew it was going to the Supreme Court. So I'm telling you, all these towns, it's just the drama. This is better than a soap opera. I mean, yeah. The lights that we use for darkness look like 2 football stadiums on a Texas Friday night. Yesterday morning, the tower structure suddenly appeared overnight. I suspected their welder worked the night hours to get the structure. Plus, a neighbor 5 houses away was awakened at 3:30 a.m. from the noise of the welder. So there it is. They're working like crazy. And I think it is just to maybe have more leverage. Your Honor, the temple is 90% done. What are we supposed to do? Yeah. Anyway, final thoughts on Cody.
Tear the damn thing down, you morons.
Yeah.
Either way, the expression is preempt the field. If the legislature shows the intent to preempt the field on this issue, then yeah, of course it has the authority.
Yeah.
As long as the federal, it all goes uphill or downhill depending on which way you're looking.
Yeah. Yep. Any thoughts, Bill? I know this took a while, but we haven't had an update like this for a little bit, and we had quite a few temples to cover.
I've got nothing to add.
All right. There we go. Back to you, RFM.
Okay, we've got a story here. It has to do with this tithing lawsuit. Like the temples, there's a bunch of lawsuits. This is the one in Salt Lake City. This is the one that is the several different lawsuits that have been slapped together. All right. So this was from the Salt Lake Tribune, Tony Cimarrad, January 18th, last Friday, I think that was Saturday, about what happened on Friday. That's when the oral argument was in front of Judge Shelby. This tithing lawsuit doesn't belong in secular courts. That's what the LDS Church is arguing. Of course, what courts would it belong in? I don't know. But it says it doesn't belong in any court. It's really what it means when it says that. Versus what the plaintiffs are saying, which is, this is a secular case. It's based on deceit, not faith. And the judge says you don't escape fraud liability just by creating a church. Bingo. Absolutely true. Lawyers for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, fought Friday to fend off what one called a broad-scale attack on the Utah-based faith's constitutional right to govern their own financial affairs. That's obviously the church's position. In the first public airing for a would-be class action lawsuit over tithing, remember, there's no class yet, okay? So if you want to be a part of this class, you got to wait and see, number one, if it's going to survive this motion to dismiss, and number two, if the class gets certified. All right. In the first public airing for a would-be class action lawsuit over tithing, church attorneys tried to convince federal judge Robert J. Shelby that the legal doctrine of religious autonomy, that's why I highlighted that, religious autonomy, should bar the suit accusing church leaders of fraud over soliciting donations for charitable causes and investing those funds in a then hidden reserve account. So religious autonomy, boys and girls, means the right of religions to conduct their internal religious affairs without government interference. That's what religious autonomy means. And pretty much everything hinges on whether those internal affairs are determined to be religious or non-religious. and secular being a word for non-religious. That's where it's all really coming down to. The essential question in this case is whether the manner in which the LDS Church has conducted its tithing collections falls under the religious autonomy exception. Going on with the story, 9 plaintiffs from 6 states are suing the Mormon Church in a case springing from an IRS whistleblower's 2019 allegations that the church's investment arm, Ensign Peak Advisors, amassed a $100 billion plus portfolio, now estimated to be over $200 billion. I added that. I thought it should be in there. Built from tithing while not spending a penny of it on the faith's religious efforts. This raises another issue in this case, which is whether the 3-year statute of limitations has already passed, since the plaintiffs knew or should have known about the harm they had suffered as a basis for bringing this lawsuit. If the judge says the statute of limitations started in 2019, they may be out of luck. We'll have to see about what happens with that issue as well. The other side, I'm sure, would be arguing, well, just because a whistleblower comes out and blows a whistle doesn't mean all of a sudden that we have the details enough to know that we are being defrauded, right? Church will take the other position. Church will argue for an earlier date that the statute of limitations commenced. Anyway, we'll see how that one goes. Plaintiffs argued Friday this is a secular case of fraud involving billions of dollars accumulated over 2 decades, one that hinges instead on deception, not faith. Tasked with deciding a church motion to toss out the federal case in its infancy, in other words, this motion to dismiss, Shelby, the judge, peppered lawyers on both sides Friday with questions that revealed fault lines in their arguments. His ruling will be issued at a later date, probably several months. As part of nearly 3 hours of back and forth in the oral arguments, Paul Clement, that's his picture, a former U.S. Solicitor General and a prominent religious freedom attorney, arguing for the church, so Paul Clement's for the church, told Shelby that because the tithing was seen as a sacred obligation, probing the plaintiff's fraud assertions would mean delving into issues of faith and belief that the First Amendment declares off limits. You see, the problem I have with an argument like that, and I'm not saying all the arguments from the church are bad, but the problem I have with an argument like that is you could say that for anybody who's in this position, regardless of how fraudulently they had acted. That's why I don't think that's going to get a lot of traction. In other words, it doesn't serve as a means whereby we can protect people from secular fraud being conducted by a church organization, right? So there's no means of helping there. Clement argued that faiths could be liable for fraud in cases of embezzlement or when funds were solicited for specific causes. He wants specific causes. He wants it for anything other than what the church did, obviously. Helping, for example, victims of the Los Angeles wildfires and then use those funds for other purposes like buying a pastor new clothes. Because the church's solicitations for the tithing are not that specific. That's why he's making that argument. He wants to distinguish it. But fraud claims over tithing, Clement continued, are necessarily out of bounds because they would involve parsing personal motives for giving that are rooted in spirituality as well as what commandments from God or statements from religious leaders on which the donors may have relied. See, that's another one. That's like a wood tool, that argument. There is no way for secular courts to mediate this dispute. He just going to say courts can never get involved if there's a religion and money and a claim by members that they're getting ripped off. That's the position he's taking. Once again, he's not going to give any leeway, even any reasonable leeway there. He says there is no way for secular courts to mediate this dispute. Well, secular courts are all we got, pal. The plaintiffs, Clement argued, are seeking to interject themselves into the church's financial decisions in a clear violation of legal protections. Shelby, the judge, pushed back, challenging whether Mormonism was seeking to expand the church autonomy doctrine and questioning the notion of creating a safe harbor in U.S. law from all fraud allegations for anyone who invokes religion and labels any cash in question as tithing. Yes, exactly. Sorry. You don't escape fraud liability, the judge said, just by creating a church. Clement countered that cases involving tithing do indeed merit a safe harbor from judicial probing. I wasn't kidding. I wasn't overstating it. This is what Clement for the church says. That, he said, is the price we have to pay to have freedom of religion and keeping secular courts out of faith. Well, what he's saying is the price we have to pay includes allowing churches to defraud their members or anybody out of their money without any way to get it back. You're just out of luck. Because instead of getting, stuck up by a robber on the street corner, you gave your tithing to a church. Church lawyers said some of the remedies the plaintiffs are seeking in the case, a freeze to all tithing while the court appoints a special monitor over the funds, also would violate the U.S. Constitution. Yeah, I'm not that crazy about these additional things they want because I think those are not really well considered. On the other hand, in other words, I don't think they got a chance of even if they won the case, I don't think they would get that. On the other hand, you can't get something that you don't ask for in court. It doesn't hurt to ask. All the judge can do is say no, but it can hurt not to ask. So anyway, I think that is making more of a political point than a genuine request, but I could be wrong. Church attorneys insist the plaintiffs have failed to state a complete fraud claim in their lawsuit and that they missed the 3-year window, that's the statute of limitations, for filing their case after the whistleblower's allegations. In a separate motion, they challenge any basis for certifying a class action of plaintiffs. Hey, Rebecca, could you read this next one? You okay for that?
I can do it. It says at one point, Clement warned that courts risked sparking a great schism within the faith by approving a class, saying it could drive a wedge between future plaintiffs joining the class and faithful Latter-day Saints who want no part of it. Oh, dear.
Yeah, another wood tool. Because you could say that to anybody, no matter what religion had defrauded their membership, no matter how badly. Christopher Seeger, a New Jersey attorney representing the plaintiffs, so now we get to hear from the plaintiff side, argued the church collected tithing and other philanthropic gifts. They're getting the tithing with promises that the money was always used on charity and church needs. Charity and church needs. We know that is false, Seeger said. He pointed to nearly $122 billion the church had built up in investment returns at Ensign Peak at one point without devoting any funds to charity over 2 decades, while at the same time, the faith spent $1.4 billion from the reserve account on a City Creek Center development in downtown Salt Lake City and to prop up a church insurance company, Beneficial Life. And there they are, respectively. Plaintiffs have labeled the church practices hoarding and called Ensign Peak a slush fund. Seeger and other attorneys also cited a 2023 settlement with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission that levied $4 million in penalties against Ensign Peak and $1 million against the church for failing to properly disclose past stock holdings and going to great lengths, regulators said, that's the SEC regulators, to deliberately obscure the size and scale of its investment portfolio. Officials with the church and Ensign Peak made no mention of church autonomy when they signed the SEC settlement, Seeger noted. What's more, he pointed to statements by the head of Ensign Peak saying church officials sought to hide the size of the account for fear that some Latter-day Saints would stop donating. These occurrences all support assertions of fraud and misrepresentations, the lawyer added, without entangling matters of faith for proof. This is a secular case, Seeger said. This can be decided by the courts. Hey, Bill, are you available to read this?
Yep.
If you're not, maybe Rebecca can.
I can. At one point, Shelby questioned whether the plaintiffs had identified actual false statements by church officials in their complaint. He also challenged whether they had adequately argued specifics on how individual plaintiffs were misled. Because some tithing funds might have been invested, the judge said, doesn't mean they are not being used for the purpose they were raised. Clements said that plaintiffs seem to be trying to second guess the church solely on the timing of its spending.
Thank you. And in its briefs, the church has stated that putting surplus donations in Ensign Peak has been part of a prudent investment strategy to rob you blind and hoard as much money as Smaug the Terrible. No, it says to advance the church's long-range mission with mentions of its temple building blitz, all of which is being done with money that doesn't even make it into the Ensign Peak account. It's all out of the $7 billion that they get every year in tithing. So temple building blitz and ever-growing philanthropic efforts as examples. Ever-growing, yeah. Thanks to the widow's mite, by the way. In the last few years, it has been growing, but it still, they don't have to go into and have not gone into the EPA. Money only goes in. It never comes out, except for those two instances that have been mentioned. City Creek Mall, Beneficial Life. No charity. Seeger noted church statements that the contributions were used immediately and 100% for charity. Meanwhile, he noted the church hadn't spent out of Ensign Peak for charitable purposes or purchases since it was created 2 decades ago. He said, we don't see that happening anytime soon. So if Judge Shelby grants the church's motion to dismiss, the matter will likely be appealed, and we'll be following this story wherever it takes us. Now, let's see. We've got another story from Rebecca. What is this at? Oh, with fasting.
Don't we get to comment on the tithing story?
No, we're just going to go on.
We're just done. We're just going to just sail on through.
Never mind. Please. Rebecca, what would you like to say about the tithing story?
I mean, this story, oh my gosh. I'd probably talk about tithing more to other people than any of the other stories out there. Just the whole idea that because somebody believes in a myth and they get other people to believe in their myth, that they can then have carte blanche to do whatever they want, which seems to be what Clements is kind of arguing. I just find that reprehensible and ridiculous. And I liked what my co-host, I saw he made a comment there that Bill put up that said, well, then take religion out of the government. You know, can you really have it both ways? You can't run for a public office unless you claim to believe in a myth, claim to be, you know, some denomination. Certainly here in Utah, there's nobody on the ballot usually, you know, that doesn't have a collective myth. So I don't know. I just have to say it chaps my hide, but I am very curious to see what's going to happen. And I thought the judge did a good job of, you know, keeping it on an even keel, and we'll see.
Yeah. Well, one man's myth is another man's religion.
That's it.
Bill.
Yeah. At 17 years old, I thought these were the guys. These are the guys who they know right from wrong. They're good. They talk to God. They give us revelation. And when it all came down, I was in my early 30s, and it all came sort of crashing down. And the last little pillar was, I don't think the church is true, but I think these guys, because they're the church, really, I think these guys are good. And then I don't know what it was, 3 months, 4 months after that thought, that I just saw enough. And one of the things was the November policy in 2015, but I'd seen enough to know that these guys are not even good. And to watch them secretly invest so much money, make so much interest. I mean, $293 billion in assets today. And these guys walk around, and every 6 months they look the members right in the eye and pretend they're still good men when they're not. And I've spent a life trying to be a better human being, and it really is difficult for me to understand how they even look in the mirror and see what they see in the reflection and sleep okay at night. But I guess it's all the money that stuffs their pillows, I guess.
Wow. Yeah, I spend my life trying to be a horrible human being, but every now and again I slip up.
Yeah.
More often than not, you slip up. That's your secret.
That's the nicest thing anybody's ever said about me. And now you're going to talk about fasting.
I am going to talk about fasting. Fast. There you go. So if you remember a couple of weeks ago, I podcasted about a stake that was having or I think it was just a ward. It was having a Christmas to Easter continual fast. They had been inspired by some of the second coming rhetoric in the last conference and a few talks, and they wanted to unleash the power of the Lord in their ward. And hey, that kind of rhymes. And so they had come up with this plan, which is the first time I'd heard of this, where at least one person every day would be continually fasting between, I think it was Christmas Eve to Easter, because we made the jokes, who's going to be the one that volunteers for New Year's and Valentine's Day? You're asking someone to fast on these holidays. So, and I think all of us made the prediction that this is not the last that we're going to hear of this. This idea is going to catch fire.
You said that specifically. And
yeah.
Madam, I perceive that thou art a prophetess.
Yes, I feel like in some ways I am a prophetess, although about really strange things. I wish I could predict other things. So anyway, I came across over the last couple of weeks. Yes, indeed, this is happening. In this case, these are some stakes in a mission area, and Elder Bednar is the one that's leading the charge here. And he has instructed them to have a continual fast. It's going to be, I think it started on the 6th. It's going up until I think the 27th or 28th of February. They've, of course, instructed them at that next Sunday to have a big old meeting where they talk about all the miracles that they saw during this time. But for those of you that don't understand this concept of a continual fast, they basically assign wards to have people volunteer to cover every single day. So there's not a single day during this prescribed time period by Elder Bednar in which a person is not fasting. And you better not be that person, right? If you sign up, can you imagine ruining everything because you didn't do it?
I can imagine that.
I know my problem with it, of course, is that I tried to picture if this would have happened when I was a kid. I guarantee my family, my parents would have signed me up for multiple days of fasting.
Mm-hmm.
I also guarantee that my parents would have been concerned. I wonder if someone's skipping today. I think I better fast just to cover it. It just brings out the scrupulosity, this OCD, I believe. But the idea is, you can't read it very well there, but it's going to unleash opportunities for missionary work. You're supposed to fast to have the bravery to approach people. Yeah, it's kind of blurry. And then it gives this particular stake where I got this from. They're supposed to have people sign up, looks like, 11, 12, 13, 14. So they've already done their part, but it's a multi-stake thing. And again, it's Elder Bednar that is said to do this. So like I said, this is catching on, this idea that you have to have somebody fasting on your behalf or for something to happen throughout a certain time period. So not to be outdone, even more fasting. Here is another stake. Now, this is a leadership meeting. Somebody, again, I can't stress this strongly enough. Faithful LDS members send us things that they would like to see, maybe some commentary on, see covered. These are great people. And they're just like, you know what? Maybe we need to talk about this, because I think they recognize that a lot of change or awareness happens from outside, right? Those of us that are more on the outside, still Mormon, I am. But, by bringing things into the spotlight, maybe some changes here. So these leadership slides, wow. This ward is telling it how it is. They are not holding anything back. Look at their sacrament meeting attendance. It's hovering there at about, 20%. You've got your convert baptisms, a little bump, but then everything's sliding down.
Is that for the prior year? I'm sorry.
Is that I can't see it anymore. It's way too small and blurry. And it was kind of weird and misleading the where it was, but you can see the way the graph is going. I wrote this. I said, this stake's leadership is taking things seriously in the new year. They are more transparent about their actual stats than the church is. Under 20% attendance at sacrament meeting, convert baptisms down, and endowed members with temple recommends under 60%. The steps they are taking to improve things include holding a fast. Okay, remember the last one was for, Christmas to Easter. The one I just showed you was for a period of several weeks. These guys are going to do it for a year. And not just one person. They're going to make sure that 2 people are fasting every day for a year from this stake. It's happening.
They're not taking
now.
any chances. They're wearing a belt and suspenders.
Nope. This is belt and suspenders fasting. You called it, RFM. This is great. And so they have a whole thing they're going to roll out. your ward or stake takes a month, and then you're responsible for getting all the people. In that Christmas to Easter fast, they had like a sign-up genie. It was all on an app. It was very organized, which I thought would lead to more OCD from people checking that, seeing if there's a slot that's open. And then they have a whole list of how to build Zion in the new year. And one of them, of course, includes fasting for the stake. And they're fasting for the purpose of, the stake and the cities and the towns and just, general improvement on these stats. So yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think very quickly? What is this about this fasting? I don't know. I have never heard of this before. This was not a concept. And now it just seems to be snowballing.
Here's what I think. First off, competition. Second off, we're trying desperately to get God's attention because God knows nothing has been working so far.
That could be it. And like I've said before, when we talk to our temple building towns, the residents there who are members of other denominations, of course, they've heard of fasting. Jesus fasted, Moses fasted, but they're just scratching their heads at why all the LDS members not eating for a day would soften their hearts or make them pass something through their city council. It just seems to be two unrelated things. And when they see those letters that we often post about, let's fast for, Cody or Heber, whatever, they just can't fathom the connection there of why to do this. So I don't know. What do you think, Bill?
Somebody once said, and it's actually profound, at least to me it is, that thoughts and prayers are actually the absolute least you can do for someone. Sending your thoughts and prayers, like it's the least you can do. And starving with a prayer to start it and end it might even be less.
It might be. And again, I don't see too much different between saying I'm going to turn in a circle 3 times and then I'm going to bow to the sun. I mean, it's an incantation, it's a spell, it's some kind of action, it's a ritual. When you feel helpless, powerless. Right now here in Utah, we are fasting and praying for moisture, my least favorite word. That word actually was voted the least attractive word in the English language, and I agree with that, moisture. But when you feel helpless and there is nothing you can do, it's out of your control, and if you're not comfortable with randomness, I think these are the things that you do.
Can I just observe that fasting is on the same continuum as human sacrifice?
It is.
The whole point of it is.
No joke.
The whole point of it is to do something that causes suffering, because that is what appeases God. He gets off on the blood. He gets off on the suffering. And fasting may just be human sacrifice 1.0, but it's the exact same idea at play. We're going to intentionally make ourselves suffer so that God will give us what it is we want.
Yep. And I think the deprivation makes you feel like you are actively doing something to make a difference. You're not being thrown into a volcano. You don't have to go that far, but you can be hungry for 24 hours and it's going to make a difference. And you're doing it for other people too. It's not just you. You're part of this team. You can't let people down. So I find it a very unhealthy practice, but I'm going to be a prophetess again. I predict we're going to see more. I think this is going to take off for all kinds of reasons. We've seen missionary work. We've seen unleashing the power of the Lord. We've seen, increased temple attendance and sacrament meeting attendance. You can pick anything.
Yes, you can. It's the wonder of fasting.
That is the wonder of fasting.
All right. Was that the end of your story, Rebecca? Are you going to hand it back to me?
And no, I'm not, because I have one more little one that kind of, my segue here is enough about fasting. We're now going to talk about cake. I thought this was really interesting. So while I was on my deathbed with my dental surgery, loaded on drugs, I was reading the Tribune and I came across this article. LDS House Republican proposes bill to keep franchise locations from having to open on Sunday. Now that just fascinated me right there. Citing religious freedom, Representative Ken Ivory has proposed a measure to preserve a day of rest or worship for franchises. Now, if you're not familiar with what a franchise is, you purchase, a business like a McDonald's or a Burger King, something that is corporate owned, and then you run it to their specifications. If I go to McDonald's here in Utah, it's going to be the same. If I go to McDonald's in New York, it should be, in theory, with maybe a few little tweaks, it should be open the same time. It should have the same kind of golden arches, the same kind of food. That's what a franchise is. But here's somebody saying, that might butt heads with religious freedom. So I found the article really interesting. I was thinking, this is so random. Where did this even come from? So it says many Christians, including members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, take the biblical prescription, thou shalt not work on the Sabbath, not as recommendation, but as a commandment. Now, a Utah legislature wants to make this edict a tad easier to heed by adding his own thou shalt not into the state law, forbidding corporations from Burger King to Jiffy Lube to Pizza Hut from requiring that their franchise owners be open on Sunday. This has a huge legal component. I'm very interested to hear you weigh in on this. This bill is about respecting the religious beliefs and practices of those who choose to own and operate a franchise so they can choose to preserve a day of rest or worship, says Ken Ivory. This bill provides them with the freedom to observe the same Sunday's accepted right and expectation enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. Then the news release only mentions a Sunday exemption. It doesn't state whether the proposed measure would offer similar religious freedom protections for Friday, the Sabbath of Muslims, or Saturday, the principal worship for Seventh-day Adventists and followers of Judaism. So far, we're just talking Christianity. Now, this is a much bigger issue than just this, I think. So they go on and talk to a franchise owner, Tim Ryan. He is the owner of the parent company of Bout Time Pub and Grub Restaurant, which is an awesome chain. I go there quite often. In fact, in Lehigh, at the Bout Time there, every first Wednesday, 7 p.m., there is a group that meets there, and we have a lot of fun. It's really awesome. It's called Alpine Happy People, so go check it out. Anyway, so he has some concerns about this. He says he harbors significant concerns about Ivory's proposal, which he said would be a blow to Utah's franchise businesses, and not just in the form of lost revenue from being closed on one shopper's busiest day. Big brands, Ryan said, work best when customers can expect a similar experience regardless of the location they visit, and that is inherently a franchise. McDonald's, as a global company, is open 365 days a year all around the world, he explained. Suddenly, a franchise owner only wants to be open 6 days. That is not going to work for McDonald's. Ryan also speculated that Ivory's plan could hurt Utah's travel and tourism industry by adding one more quirky law to the books that, like the state's liquor laws, could be a turnoff for out-of-towners. And I think that's true. One time I was running in Alpine, which closes down everything. So does Highline. This is in Utah County. And I came across another couple from out of state, and they said, "What is happening here? Why is nothing open here? What have I stumbled on?" Like, they were genuinely so confused and disturbed by the whole town being shut down, right? Because those smaller towns already have those laws of not being open on Sunday. Let me see. I'll go on here. So Melva, is that really her name? Melva.
Why do you find that humorous?
No, I'm not going to tell you why.
Doesn't have to do with Jerry Seinfeld, does it?
Melva Stein, president and CEO of the Utah Restaurant Association, is less worried. "I don't think this will have an impact on most of our franchises in the state," she said, "or Utah's sterling pro-business reputation. A chief reason is that franchises, from day spa operators to car washes, owners agree to the operating hours before they open a location. So they know what they're getting into when they sign up for a franchise. If you sign and agree to dates and times of operation in a franchise agreement," she pointed out, "then you have to live up to the agreement you signed." And this is what I thought too. And that's why I thought this is such a strange bill for somebody to put out. And then a few days later, I found out why. So let's watch this. And again, you get to look at amazing cakes. So this will be fun.
The financial impact is something that we've also considered and causes us great concern.
Should businesses stay open or closed on Sundays? I'm Maya Constantino in Salt Lake City. The company Nothing But Cakes enforced a corporate mandate recently that says franchises in Utah must remain open on Sundays. The owner of the franchises spoke out against the mandate that has now sparked a dispute in our community.
Sundays have always meant a lot to owner Kelsey Hunt. As a mother of 3, she considers it a day to spend time with her family, and more importantly, a holy day.
Truly, it is for us a day of worship. And so it goes against our values and our faith of preserving that day and what it means to us by opening and operating on those days.
And back in 2018, when Hunt decided to take over the franchises in Utah, she says they weren't required to open on Sundays.
So that was one of the things that we spent a great deal of time going over with the corporate leadership during that meeting, and something we felt very strongly about in working with Nothing But Cakes.
Hunt says about 2 years ago, she noticed the corporation started to encourage Utah franchises to open on Sundays.
They started just suggesting it as like would be something to consider as individual bakeries, knowing that it wasn't a requirement in our operations manual at the time.
Then, last summer, she noticed a change.
Notification was sent out. The operations manual in 2024 was updated to then require Sundays.
And she says that mandate requires them to open on Sundays starting on February 2nd. Hunt reached out to Representative Ken Ivory about the issue. In early January, he introduced a bill that, according to a news release, would ensure franchises have the assurance that their religious rights and convictions are not infringed unless such stipulation was expressly negotiated and included in the initial franchise agreement. Hunt says Utah Bakery sent a request to Nothing But Cakes Corporate asking for a delay in the mandate because of the pending legislation, but have not received a response. Nothing But Cakes said in a statement, "We communicated the importance of being open all week long to our entire franchise system over a year ago. This provided them with time to prepare and is consistent with our franchise agreements." Salt Lake Community College will host a meeting to discuss Representative Ken Ivory's bill Tuesday evening. In Salt Lake City, Maya Constantino, Fox 13 News, Utah.
So why is he creating this bill, which would admittedly, by him, not affect this situation?
Yes. I have no idea, but now I know that.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry. This is one where actually, let me go back and away from him, okay? Because I may have said it backward. This is a situation where they come in, they've got the franchises, and there's nothing in the contract that says they have to stay open 7 days a week.
Right.
Okay. That's it. You don't get to unilaterally change the terms of a contract.
No, it is kind of interesting if you listen closely. And for some reason, I can't advance the slide now past that, but I will tell you what happened. So the owner of the Nothing But Cakes, which, by the way, is delicious, which, by the way, I've gone there many times, and I would love it if they were open 7 days a week. So basically, it says here, there was another article. She went to the representative and said, hey, I value Sunday. My franchise is trying to make me open on Sunday. That's not what I signed up for initially. So it says the mandate now requires the locations to open on Sunday starting February 2nd. So coming up really soon. Hunt reached out to represent Ken Ivory, who introduced a bill in January that would ensure a franchise have the same assurance that their religious rights and convictions are not infringed unless the stipulation was expressly negotiated and included in the initial franchise agreement. The corporate office of Nothing But Cakes shared a statement about the issue, which let's see, and what their path forward will look like. They said, this is Nothing But Cakes, the franchise owners are saying, we communicated the importance of being open all week long to our entire franchise system over a year ago.
Doesn't matter.
The statement said, this provides them with time to prepare and is consistent with our franchise agreements.
Doesn't matter.
Like all franchise business in Utah, they operate 7 days a week, and we will watch this proposed legislation closely. Yeah, that's what I thought. Doesn't matter. I said, I know RFM is going to say doesn't matter. But then I dug in a little farther because I thought, why are they thinking they can do this? So this is what happened. In 2021, a private equity firm acquired the chain, and then the culture began to shift. Pressure to open on Sunday mounted slowly. Then all at once, with the company announcing last year that all stores would be required to welcome Sunday customers starting in February 2025. Here's where it explains it. The reason the company can do this has to do with the contract many owners signed. Rather than specify hours, they said, the document required franchisees to keep the hours outlined in the operations manual, which company headquarters have since updated to require Sunday openings. It's removed one step. And the woman even said, I signed that I would follow what was in the corporate handbook or the church handbook, right? It's kind of similar. They've changed the corporate handbook because of new ownership. So I don't know, RFM, what do you think? I was so curious to get your take on this because she didn't sign up to never work Sunday. She signed up to do what was in the handbook. And at that point, Sunday was not in the handbook. But now under new ownership, Sunday is in the handbook.
Well, now I think it's between her and her boss.
Yeah.
Either they can come to some kind of agreement, or if not, they got to part ways.
Yep. Exactly.
I don't like this idea about getting legislation involved. I don't like this idea about getting religion involved, for crying out loud. I know he talks about religious freedom. What about franchise freedom? What about business freedom in this country? To be free from the government and to be free from religion, for crying out loud.
That's it. In fact, so then I went further. I thought, what do other people think about this? And so I found this Seventh-day Adventist reporter. I thought this was very interesting. This is kind of what you just said, RFM. He said, Sunday law advocates in the United States are making gradual progress toward the ultimate goal of mandating nationwide business closures on Sunday. This recent initiative in Utah, which targets major franchises under the guise of promoting worship, family values, and rest, demonstrates a strategic plan to normalize Sunday restrictions. If passed, this will undoubtedly help create a precedent that could be replicated elsewhere, framing the policy as a moral and social benefit. Think about what is happening. We are talking about a calculated push, here we go, by Republicans in Utah to pass a law with the goal of enforcing Sunday closure. It would be a statewide Sunday law for franchises. How long before all the other businesses face the same pressure? How long?
What pressure? What pressure? Wait a second. What pressure?
That's what he's saying. It's going to escalate. This is what this person is seeing. This is just a foot in the door, right?
Even if this were to pass and be upheld, okay?
Yes.
Two big questions.
Oh, no,
it's just saying a franchisee holder, right? Yes. A franchise holder has the option of closing on Sunday.
That's what he's saying, that you can do that. And other building and other businesses too can do that too. He's saying, how long will it take before other states become emboldened with this action and impose their own Sunday closings? In any event, the Sunday movement is working to make Sunday law more widely enforced. And we are getting closer every day to the mark of the beast crisis.
Well, that certainly lends a lot of credibility to his article. And I've got to tell you, this is why the Seventh-day Adventists are so pissed off about this. Because when the hell are they going to go shopping? I mean, they can't go on Sunday because that's their Sabbath. And if all the stores are closed on Sunday, then they're screwed.
That's it. No, I like this. I was like, I was reading it. Whoa. And then I went, oh dear. Oh, well, I'm still going to say it because it's kind of funny. But anyway, interesting. The mark of the beast crisis. That's right. Interesting, though. Living here in Utah with all the wonky, quirky laws and, interesting. If a business owner, how much autonomy do they have? I don't know. Bill, any thoughts? And then we'll move on to your story.
That's that nothing bunt cakes is a great play on words. And if she doesn't want to keep the company policy, she'll have to come up with something creative to start a business of her own. But I don't think it's that easy to come up with a play on words and create another dessert brand. So
I've got one. I've got one right now. Okay. When you need this, come to me. It's Mark of the Beast Bunt Cakes.
Sorry, you made me snort laugh. Oh my God.
Those will sell like hotcakes in Utah. Guaranteed.
They'll sell like bunt cakes. Anyway, that's all I've got. It's very interesting, and we'll keep an eye on it. We will keep an eye on this legislation. So,
all right. So now, Bill, Rebecca having handed it back to me, let me give it to you. I just found out 3 minutes before the show started that I was going to be in charge. Okay. Oh, Bill's going to talk about the Brodie Awards. Has that already happened?
It has. And I just want to say, first off, I've been sort of watching these for years, but I always sort of catch wind of them way late in the process. So I'll just start off by saying to the folks who run the Brodie Awards, I'd love to at least see if there's ways that I and others in the content creation realm of post-Mormonism could help you give more publicity to this on the front end, so that rather than something winning because it got 70 votes, somebody would win because they got 420 votes. And I think we can do that. I also want to note, and I said this to you, RFM, before the show tonight when you and I were on a phone call, but there are ways in which if any of us help on the front end of announcing that the nominations are there to take place, announcing that voting is happening, please vote, we're going to easily have ability to sway or manipulate our followers, fans, listeners, donors to weigh overly heavily on our brand of content, whether it's Mormonish or Mormonism Live or Radio Free Mormon.
Well, that's the whole point, isn't it?
It is for Fair Mormon when they were trying to win Podcast of the Year for sure, but I wouldn't want to manipulate things, but I would love to at least see if we can put our heads together and come up with ways to make this more visible and recognizable, because I think it is a lot of work that goes into it, and I think it's a great opportunity to give people in the post-Mormon community a chance to acknowledge and thank those who have produced things over the course of the year. So with that said, if you are one of the folks who are involved in the Brodie Awards, please, by all means, reach out. I'd love to see if there's a way that we could create more visibility. The Brodie Awards happen annually, and they've happened, as far as I know, as far back as 2013, maybe further back than that. Because my first or second year in doing content creation, I was nominated for a John Taylor podcast I did that I didn't think it was that great, but it got nominated. It didn't win. Didn't expect it to, but I've been following the awards every year since. And this year, the awards just came out. It just happened the other day. And so I'll note here, we'll just run really quickly through these. So first off, this was announced some time back, and they get to this sort of earlier than the rest of the nominations and the rest of the tallying. But the 2024 Ex-Mormon of the Year was none other than Nemo the Mormon, who was excommunicated this past year. So there's that. Then they give out a set of awards for year-long achievements. Biggest Mormon douche canoe, supporting the Exmo cause in 2024. I expected it to be Jacob Hansen.
It was a close race.
But it wasn't. It was David A. Bednar. And he won. So there's David. David and Susan would like to thank their Heavenly Father. Best LDS interest social media contributor. It's a pseudonymous person on Reddit named 3 a.m. doorknob turn. So whatever that means, and I'm a little nervous to even ask. Best LDS interest discussion community forum from 2024, Reddit Ex-Mormon. I think we all saw that one coming. Best new LDS interest content creator in 2024. That's a younger picture of her, but Alyssa Grenfell, who I think does a fantastic job. Funniest LDS interest humor site of 2024, The Lord's Newsroom. And if you go check out The Lord's Newsroom, their content is hilarious. So they do a great job over there. We're familiar with this one. Best LDS interest informational site 2024. That's the Widow's Mite Report.
And by the way, Bill, we're going to be having Spencer Anderson, professor of economics, on the show, Mormonism Live, on Wednesday to talk about the 2024 annual report on the church that the Widow's Mite Report put up recently.
These guys do the best job on planet Earth at looking at the data from multiple points of view, from multiple things that are going on, and give an approximation of what the LDS church is doing and whether things are moving up or down and what it is that we should take note of. So kudos to them. Best LDS interest video channel of 2024, Nemo the Mormon.
Wow.
And then best LDS interest podcast.
Is that Nemo the Mormon?
That's not. Best LDS interest podcast 2024, Radio Free Mormon. And that's not the picture I had, but thank you, RFM.
I did change it out. I wanted to put on something more formal.
I love it. You should for the award ceremony. And by the way, I think I would love to see the Brodies have a live video format award ceremony. That would be really cool. But Radio Free Mormon, congrats to you for winning the Best LDS Interest Podcast of 2024. It says a lot. You won in 2017 for Best New Podcast, and then you won again in 2018 for Best Podcast, 2019 Best Podcast. You won something in 2021, and then again here 2024 Best LDS Interest Podcast. You have won a ton of these. I don't know how you even have room on your fireplace mantle and where you're going to add this one. But with that said,
they continue on the hearth below.
Yeah, good. Let's continue with the individual awards for the Brodies. Best LDS Interest Book. By the way, this convinced me to order a copy of this today, $9.99 on Amazon. Paul H. Dumm, It's All True. Tales of Unworthiness, 3 short stories. That's the best LDS interest book fiction of 2024. Best LDS interest book nonfiction 2024, Dictates of Conscience, From Mormon High Priest to My New Life as a Woman. Lori Lee Hall, you've interviewed her a few times, Rebecca. Dictates of Conscience, From Mormon High Priest to My New Life as a Woman. Lori Lee Hall won the Best LDS Interest Book of Nonfiction 2024. Best LDS Interest Book Non-Narrative Nonfiction 2024. We've talked about this on this show, and we've done episodes and stuff where this has been mentioned, but Second Class Saints, Matthew Harris won that category. Best LDS interest work of poetry or scripture, the Book of Lavins, written by Evan Sharley, author Evan Sharley, editor.
Is that Linda Lavins?
I don't think so. Editor Alex Criddle, and first edition topographer Heather Palmer. Congrats to them. Best LDS interest song, we all would have seen this one coming, Held Together by David Archuleta. I pulled that picture just today, so 302.7 thousand views, released 8 months ago. Hard to believe it's been that long already. Best LDS interest image of 2024, President Nelson making more changes on a whim. Rebecca, this was posted, I know, on your Facebook page.
That's my Trexmo.
This is you. This is Rebecca.
Trexmo didn't win. We lost out to the Lord's newsroom, but my meme did. So
yeah, look, there you go. Nice. President Nelson making more changes on a whim. The average LDS member being thrown all around the Starship Enterprise. So, most humorous LDS interest work of 2024. This was again the Lord's newsroom. They won for the general category as well for that. But church leaders worry prominent LDS therapist openly promoting healthy emotional skills. That's, anyway, that's funny for all the right reasons. Best exit story of 2024. Again, it is Nemo the Mormon. My Excommunication is Official is the name of that video. So there's that one.
He's like Ben-Hur. He's winning all the awards.
Yeah, you and him have got like half of the awards for the Brodies. Best LDS interest short video of 2024. Could Joseph Smith have written the Book of Mormon by Nemo the Mormon? By the way, this one should also, half a trophy should go to good old Brian Hales, because he's the person used that Nemo's making the commentary about what's being said. So congrats to Nemo. Congrats to Brian Hales. I
want to ask Brian Hales a question. Where did all the awards come from?
The awards. The longer the sentence, the more historical the thing is. The Best LDS Interest Investigative Reporting 2024. Again, congrats to the Widow's Mite Report. You guys do a hell of a job over there. Best LDS Interest Post title of 2024. I actually read this today. I didn't know this existed, but I went and read this today. Mormon polygamous men were really bad at sex, a hypothesis by Abby Maxwell Hansen. And she demonstrates her hypothesis with lots of good evidence. And I think she makes a strong argument that Mormon leaders aren't that great in the sack. So there's that. Best Analysis of Mormonism and Marginalized Groups 2024. This was the interview of Matthew L. Harris on Mormon Stories podcast. Second Class Saints, Black Mormons in the Struggle for Racial Equality.
That was like 17 parts, and I may be underestimating it. It was a massive,
it's like
massive
40
endeavor.
hours. Yeah.
The first 6 take Matthew Harris through the 3rd grade, and then it picks up from there. Yes. Okay. So congrats to Mormon Stories and John DeLynn. Most insightful analysis of LDS culture or doctrine 2024. Tapers are hate speech now by Nemo the Mormon. And he's basing this on somebody in the apologetic community is making the argument that by mentioning tapers as horses, you are using Mormon hate speech. So again, Nemo's got another Brodie Award to add to the mantle.
If you look at the nose on that thing, you can go back and look at the nose on thing. Mentioning a taper could also constitute sexual harassment.
It could.
A taper is a very special animal.
And then a few of our own took home some prizes from the Brodie Awards, some Brodie trophies. So the best activism within the LDS Church 2024. This is Rebecca Biblioteca, Landon Brophy, and Nemo the Mormon for challenging the McKinney, Texas Temple steeple height. So congrats to you, Rebecca. Congrats to you, Landon. This was your first Brodie Award, correct?
I think so. Yeah, it was funny because our friend Tim Rathbone messaged me late at night and he sent me the results. And I go, I love the Brodies. I've been putting out 2 episodes a week for 2 years. I've never won a goddamn thing. And he goes, well, you won. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know I was nominated.
I love the Brodies.
I take all of it back.
I'm so honored.
I'd like to thank the Academy. I'm not going to fawn over my Brodie, but I will say that, it really was a labor of love. That was Landon's joke. He made me make it. I'm sorry. Y'all know how he is, but yeah, thank you, everybody.
I love it. I love it. Well, congrats to you guys. Congrats to Nemo again. And then a couple here that strike pretty close to home. Best LDS Interest Podcast 2024. This was Mormonism Live's Getting Your Own Planet in Mormonism. And then also RFM and myself, we took home Best LDS History Piece 2024 Mormonism Live. And this was Did the LDS Church Support the Nazis? And so those were the last 2, I believe, in that category.
I got to break in. If you don't know this, on Mormonism Live, as a typical rule, with some exceptions, Bill and I alternate weeks. And 1 week will be our show, which means we'll be in charge of it, picking it, doing the main research, if there's a guest, scheduling that, all those kinds of things. And the other person's there in more of a supportive role. And then that'll flip from week to week. Both of these, Did the LDS Church Support the Nazis? That was Bill's show. And Getting Your Own Planet in Mormonism, that was Bill's show too.
Yeah, it's a team effort, RFM. So
he said,
They were excellent episodes. Everybody contributed. They were great.
Yeah, by the way, I'm not trying to be snarky. It's just that RFM is famous for chiding us. So once in a while, if I get a chance to chide back just a little bit, I don't mind. So there's that. But thank you. Those are 2 fun episodes to put on. The Brodie Awards, folks, if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it. And I think it's a great opportunity to submit things that have been impactful to you over the course of the past year. You get the chance to vote on a whole list of things to let the general crowd know what were your favorite things that you enjoyed in post-Mormonism or in nuanced Mormonism from the year before. And it's a chance for you to thank those who have put in all the time and effort into creating the content in a way that they can be recognized for it. So to the Brodie Awards, I'm grateful that you guys do that every year. If there's any way that we can help with the visibility, please let us know.
And you know what I'd like to see next year? I would like to see a category for Mormon news programs. There are a lot of really good ones. I mean, we have the newscast. Mormon News Roundup has been going for several years. They're excellent and generally unquotable. And I know there's some others. I mean, people really take this seriously and do a really good job. I think that'd be a really interesting category.
Well, great. Because all you have to do is propose them. And they're very willing on the other end to allow pretty much whatever's proposed in any nominations that anybody wants to make within those categories. So it's quite diplomatic. So also this Friday, I should hand this over to you. Back to you, Rebecca. Do you want to talk? Do you have anything you have going on Mormonish or the Good Blood Club?
Whatever that is, the Good Cluck Cluck. Yeah, exactly. So I will say I did advertise 2 weeks ago, that we were having Matt Harris on the Good Book Club. That did happen. Those of you that missed it, we had a huge crowd. It was really awesome. I couldn't be on it because of my dental emergency, but Landon ran it. We put that out as a Mormonish episode last Friday. So you can find that on Mormonish, the whole book club with 2 hours of Matt Harris. I know he's been on John DeLynn. This was different. This was kind of talking to Matt about how he wrote the book, what happened, why, his personal experience with it. It's excellent. So that's just a regular Mormonish episode. Coming up on Tuesday, we have an episode that I found probably one of the most fascinating episodes we've ever taped, and also an episode that scared me, less. It is about AI. It is about the future of AI. They're coming like right now, and also its intersection with religion and artificial intelligence and religion. And we have the amazing Troy Levitt. He is a Disney gamer. He is a brilliant person, and he's going to talk to us all about how the future is here, everybody, and religion, it's only going to get more and more interesting. So that's Tuesday night, tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time on Mormonish Podcast.
Thank you so much. Friday, Mormonism After Dark at 8 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time is rapidly becoming the place to be on a Friday evening. In fact, there are those out there who are saying that last Friday's was the most fun Mormonism After Dark that's been produced yet in its 6 months of existence. And I know that because Bill's the one who said it.
There was a moment where I couldn't contain myself. I don't remember what it was you said, but I laughed for quite a few minutes. So that's that. I don't know what else you want me to say about it, but Fridays are a lot of fun. Bring an adult beverage or don't, and come enjoy your time with Radio Free Mormon and myself as we have a good time on Mormonism After Dark.
Yes. So thank you, everybody. Well, I'll be working on RFM this Saturday, and we've already talked so much about things that I don't want to muck that up. That's the furthest out there. It's going to be great, though, addressing a very important point going on right now in Mormon apologetics. Okay, so everybody, thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of the Mormon Newscast. Please remember to join us next time, which will be next Monday on January 27th, if my math is any good, for the next episode of the Mormon Newscast. Good night, everybody.
Dieter Uchtdorf here. That's a wrap for this week's flight of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you flying first class with us and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast. Doubt your doubts.